Today we have an amazing guest, Andrej Berlin. Andrej is the co-founder and CEO of Deep Work. He has been involved in the design of over 100 different products and services from open source teams, startups, enterprises, and Fortune 500 companies. He is an advocate for mental and physical health and considers work an integral part of a meaningful life. So now if you're a designer listening to this episode right now and you're thinking about, well, how can I actually get involved and get some real life experience working on design projects, go over to Deepwork Studio, get involved in their Discord community, right? And then you can actually shadow on projects, you can participate in projects, and the best part is you'll actually get paid for learning and getting better at design. So without further ado, Andrej, welcome to the show, man. Super excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, also very excited. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So really quickly, just want to know, were you always interested in design? How did you first get involved in the field of design?
Wow, that's a great question. I actually never considered myself a designer, and my story is actually quite janky, so it goes in a lot of different directions. I started studying maths and psychology, and I was actually interested in performing magic, and that brought me to maths and psychology, but I didn't do that for a long time because it was very intense and I needed some time to do other things. So I went into film, studied film, got a little bit of experience in design there, and then went actually back into psychology and computer science, and then did that for about a year. And then I got an offer from a friend of a friend to join their agency startup that was focusing on UX design. And I was like, that's quite interesting because it actually combines user experience and psychology, but also it is a little bit heavy on computer science because I need to understand the technology and I'm going to get paid for it. So that seems like a good thing to do. And I tried that. And ever since then, I was kind of in that path and evolving more and more in doing design. Although I would say I'm actually very hesitant to do visual design work myself. So I'm more concerned with problem solving rather than visual design.
Got it. And then you're working at this company. Did you always have this itch to do your own thing? What actually led to just you leaving that company and then now starting Deepwork Studio?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. I think I was always trying to solve small incremental problems. And before I joined the agency, I was traveling around and I was in different countries, and I met a Russian girl in Sri Lanka, kind of fell in love with her. And then I had this problem of she lives there, I'm in Germany, but I don't have a job that allows me to actually survive anywhere else. So I need to figure out a way to make money elsewhere. And I met people along the way who were translators, and they were like, hey, this is how I make my money. And I have a base in Belgium, but I also travel around and do translation work. And when I started working at the agency, most of it was okay, I'm going to do UX design. That's possible remotely. It needs only a computer. But then also it was very exciting. And there was this part about doing workshops together, and they were super efficient. So the amount of knowledge exchange you get in a workshop is insane. And from there, I was constantly trying to figure out how to do that remotely because it just seemed to be super valuable. And at some point, we just disagreed. So the guys were we're not interested in online work. That was late 2017. And I was like, how can you not see this? And
you're definitely in the future. Yeah.
I left because of this kind of misalignment and started exploring further how I can make that happen. And so that actually led to Deep Work.
And then how did you meet your co-founder, Charlie?
I met him at a conference, stealing t-shirts not stealing, but taking t-shirts from a design stand at the conference. I was actually just brought along over a couple of months by another blockchain team that were we need UX design and he can do UX design. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to come along. And so I flew around and on different conferences, tried to kind of pick up as much as I can. And at DEF CON 4, I think, in Prague. I wanted to get to this side event because I didn't get any main event tickets. And I went in, was super intimidated by the amount of people. So I went out again. And then I met a guy who I met like several months before. And he was like, you should go in there. It's fun. And I was like, okay, well, now that must be something. And then went back in and then, started talking to Charlie. And he was like, we should definitely start working together. And that was the start of what we then started building together as an agency, and now it was become Deep Work.
Wow. It's always fascinating for me to like hear stories of how people eventually meet their co-founders or other people they collaborate with. And this is just, and Charlie's also based with you in Berlin, I'm assuming?
No, he's actually in Spain, in Ibiza. He lives on the calm side of the island.
Oh my God. I was like, Ibiza. Oh my God, man, that must be so cool.
Yeah. It's actually very pleasant where he lives. Very nice weather, very nice people. And it was kind of funny because most people I worked with or like done deep work with, I've never seen in person. And Charlie, I met like once at that conference and then like not at all for a year or so.
Oh my God.
And we did everything online.
It's very interesting for me to see because, you know, like a lot of us are used to the old school way of working, which is, okay, I meet Andrej in person, we work together in person, you come over for dinner or we go out for dinner, we kind of like bond in person. And that leads to like building that trust. But it's so interesting that you met this person one time at the conference and all the interactions later on have been virtual, like online, you know?
Yeah.
And you're able to build that trust. Like it's now like the new thing is building trust over the internet.
That's a very tough one. And it's not been easy. So it's not like, hey, we met once and then we were like best friends and like it was super cool. It was more because we saw value in each other's skill sets and we're like, we could start something together that's greater than the both of us. And we came from completely different places. We were in completely different mental places. We both had like health issues that were inhibiting us and keeping us out of balance. And working together actually kept us going. So we were like, there is actually no way to stopping this because like what we're working on is like, it has to continue. And we went through a lot of really intense, like, I wouldn't say fights, but like arguments and like clarifications. And so it was very, very tense, but eventually things just get solved as we both have learned about ourselves and each other and other people as well. And like through building stuff together online. And yeah, trust is a very difficult part online in general.
Yeah. And when there's money involved, it gets even difficult. Like if you're just collaborating with someone on a project just like that or talking, it's a different story. But when it's like money involved, when it's like this, you're starting a company, it's definitely raises the stakes.
Yeah, totally. But I also think that money can be an interesting tool for building trust. And I think that's kind of the tendency of most organizations now, especially with blockchain software, is that we can create interfaces for humans to become incentivized to be more truthful and making predictions about their own performance, because if they meet these predictions in the future, they get rewarded. And if they don't, then they don't get rewarded. And so it kind of incentivizes people to just be nicer to each other, I guess.
So this is really interesting that you bring up this point, because what you have created with Deep Work is one of the first or pioneering studios is actually decentralized. And for those people wondering what I mean by decentralized, is just meaning that it's not in a centralized location. It's people, contributors from all around the world that can contribute to Deep Work. They can take part in Deep Work, help out. And what I'm curious to know is that why not just start a typical design agency, hire employees full-time on staff, just grow more? Why did you go down this route of like making it decentralized?
It's a good question. I think actually it's inevitable. So from my perspective, at least, it was an inevitable process because it was based on a lot of kind of errors and progressions. And also so my definition of decentralized is actually, so there's different ways to kind of look at it, but it's not that like it's not that there is no like never an authority, and there are organizations that try to be just like, we don't have a CEO, we just like anarchy, and it becomes anarchy. It doesn't really work. Decentralization is actually kind of, from my perspective, a particular step in the process of scaling of an organization. So you'll always start with as yourself, as a freelancer, with your own business. And then you have like a couple of people because you start getting more clients and more jobs. So you have to like find an intern or find some support in other areas. And you have this like small team. And then if you go further beyond that and you actually establish yourself as part of something that just is so unique and so required by the market, that you have to create, like you have to multiply yourself somehow.
Yes.
And traditionally, you would just hire people in. You would hire people for HR. You will have a financial department. You will have marketing.
Yep.
And because you can't make all these decisions yourself, it just becomes way too big. And the centralization comes in basically at this stage where we can now use tools, software, to basically distribute the decision load to all the individuals from you as the founder or as the leader. And you still have like, you make your decisions that you need to make, but you're distributing the kind of decisions that everybody else can make across the whole network of people. And so that basically eliminates any managerial layer. The reason why this works is actually simply because you can write software that, as I mentioned earlier, that can compensate people for these tasks that are very specific to the outcome. So you can compensate people for like exactly the tasks that an HR person would do, but you assign that to a freelancer. Like that is now you can do that. You can quality control someone else now. If you do it well, you get paid. Or, doing marketing, like you're talking about, if you're finding a referral, okay, cool. You get like 6% referral bonus. And because there's a lot of these small decisions, you're basically designing a software that automates all of these decision-making processes. So they're kind of like distributed across the network of your individuals. And so the values in that are many. So if that's done right, you're actually getting as close to meritocracy as you can. You're also enabling a network of freelancers where people can do the work if they want to, but they also don't need to if they don't want to. And you kind of even creating the decision-making in these things.
It's like the gig economy, like with Uber and Lyft. The appeal was that you set your own schedule. If you want to drive today, you drive. If you don't want to, you don't do it. It's totally
right.
And you're not hiring all these full-time people.
Except there's another thing. Yes, that's definitely a bonus. And another thing that's also very valuable about that is that not only do you get paid for like doing the work and you just are completely full sustainable, but you also at the same time maintain a profit share of the organization. And that's relatively unique because that's normally something that's only possible with a like traditional business where you have equity. Because you have people on salary, on payroll, and you have the documentation of who's where.
Yeah.
What do people do? They get bonuses. But here you have the combination of full freedom of what they want to do, and at the same time a stake in the organization, and that stake also incentivizes them to do the best thing they can for the organization because that increases the percentage of the share.
And I think this is something I definitely want to dig in further, the profit sharing and stuff in a bit. Mm-hmm. But before that, you said there were progressions and errors that kind of led you to this decentralized model. So I want to know, like, what other models did you experiment with and why did they not work, or what was your takeaway from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of incremental steps. So obviously I started off as a freelancer and that's super lonely, at least it was to me. And the meeting Charlie and kind of starting the business with him was not like I saw him and I was like, we definitely need to like collaborate. But it was that I learned before that having a partner is something that's actually very, very helpful if you're starting basically doing anything. Like it's very helpful to have another human or ideally a whole network of people. So we were freelancing together then, and that was great. But then, and we basically hired a couple of people to help us. And the problem with hiring was that there was like, sometimes there were projects and sometimes there were no projects. And sometimes we would just like sit around and paying this guy, and he was like, what am I supposed to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, just come up with something. You just get paid for it anyway. That was just a bit tricky because he didn't know what to do, but he felt like he had to. And I didn't know what to tell him because we just didn't have any projects. So then we said, okay, let's just only work with freelancers. That keeps us flexible. And then it was like, okay, so how do we do this equity part? Because people who work with us right now are actually very helpful in building what we want to build in the future, and we want to compensate them. And that was like, okay, we'll have to figure it out. But that's like maybe for later. We'll find that out. A bigger, more pressing issue was that we would have projects and we would schedule freelancers in, and they would basically tell us they can do that job. I'm like a good user researcher. I can do the interviews, write the report. And then we were like, okay, cool. Yeah, I know you. So you're going to do a good job. And we went on that project and they just didn't do it, or like they did it to a quality of work that was so far below what our standard was that we actually kind of felt really bad for the client. And that becomes tricky because then you have freelancers who promise stuff and you're like, how are you supposed to double check them? Because like you have to, like, you're spending tons of time on quality assessing every single person and hiring them. And that's like, it's not sustainable. And so that then led us to kind of setting up this buddy system where we basically had people to actually work on the projects first and prove that they can do it. Mm-hmm. And then when they've done it, and they didn't take any responsibility, and when they've done it, they would get like a badge in Discord, or like, we put them on a list and then like, okay, you're an expert, you can do it, I trust you with this. So that was kind of the next stage. And then
so right there, like where you have the buddy system, where like if you just hire freelancers and you see their work and you think they're going to deliver, but then for some reason you've got a client project, they don't deliver, it looks bad for you, for the studio.
Yeah.
But now you're like, you have to prove yourself before you're given that responsibility. So doesn't that, again, to your point, make scaling a little bit difficult? Because like, even if, let's say, an expert comes in, they have good experience, but you're like, no, you got to prove yourself first.
Right.
And they might be like, no, I don't want to prove myself. This is my work. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, we had that.
Oh, okay.
So, we went through a lot of different cases. It's very difficult to kind of explain all of them because each of these little tiny things where someone was like, I know I'm good. I don't have to adhere to your HR thing. Let me just do the work. And they were like, okay. And that's like, okay, it didn't work out. Another project. So it was never that bad because we could, from that point on, we could always kind of save the outcome. But yeah, there were these cases, and then there was another case where someone, and then we started. Okay, so we have a specific process, our design process. We're just gonna write it out like step by step, do that exactly as it says here. It's like online. You can look it up on our knowledge base. And people would come in and were like, they were designing and then they didn't finish in time. And we were like, well, why did that not work out? And we're like, I don't know. So we looked at how they worked and they just didn't follow the process. And we're like, okay,
oh my God.
It's like, and then their argument was like, yeah, it's just like, I have my own process. And it's like, yeah. Cool, okay, but it's not going to work out then. And so that led us to kind of really like have to stick to this whole process step by step and actually kind of get compensated only when you actually follow that process. And that gets evolved over time, in general anyway. Sorry, I don't know if that was if that answered
it. It does. Like I'm trying to understand, like, how do you take that risk? Like the first few times where you had all these people that just didn't want to follow the process because like, I'm a designer, why should I follow that process? Like, I mean, it's pretty simple.
Right.
But then you have a client who's paying for this work, and then at the end of 1 week or 2 weeks, the work is not done. So how did you manage that expectation with the client? Like, did you just have to like tell the client like it's going to be okay, or did you have to step in personally and finish the project? Like, how did you minimize damage control?
Yeah, that was mostly the latter. So this buddy system is basically set up in a way that there is range of vetted experts. So it started off with Charlie and me. We kind of vetted ourselves. Like, okay, we can do these things.
Yeah.
And you know, we can finish a project. And then we started meeting new people and like meeting really like amazing user researchers, amazing product designers, freelancers. And we're like, you do the job actually better than I would do. And so that's like, you get the expert badge, and now you're part of that vetted list. And then these people are also like, everybody who's an expert basically takes responsibility of a successful outcome. And whenever someone else comes in and kind of supports the experts on the project, they split the tasks. So expert does their own list of tasks. The collaborator, that's what I call them, they do another set of tasks that's on the proximal zone of development. And they agree on that. They work through the project. And then after the project, they reevaluate. So the expert always takes responsibility of a finished outcome. They always watch, and they get like a bonus for mentoring, like a kind of a payment bonus. And then after the project, they evaluate the collaborator. They tell him, okay, you did like 4 out of these 5 things you did well. Great. You get badges for all of these 4 things. And then next time, because they would have these badges, someone would work with them and they were like, okay, so you have been attested that you can do these things. So that now I trust you that you can also do these things. And also I can look at which project you have worked on in the past, and also ask the other person who's worked with you in the past, who gave you feedback. So that creates a lot of more trust than just saying like, hey, here's my CV, or like, here's my LinkedIn profile.
It's like proof of work. Like you're showing that you can do the work, rather than just like saying you can do it. And you know, in traditional organizations, like when we have performance reviews, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that you're my boss and you give me a performance rating. Let's say it's not a good rating. You're like, oh, mediocre rating. And I'm not happy. You know, I can go to HR and the HR will step in and try to listen to both sides of the story. There's all this drama that comes up. In the model you described, let's say that you are the expert and I worked with you on a project and you said, Janiel, out of 5 things, you did 3 things, and here's the skill for these. And let's say I disagree with that. I say that, you know what, I think I did 4 of these things, not 3. So when there's a dispute in the assessment from the expert for the buddy in that system, do you have to get involved? Do they bring it up to you? Or it's like, it is what it is?
There's generally always a role of an evaluator. And that goes also for payments. And that's not my idea. That's an idea of, or like, at least I found it first in the software called Colony. You should check it out. It's I really like it. It's very well designed. It's incredibly well designed. And essentially you have like, you have that one-to-one collaboration. And if there's a dispute, you can almost create a little like market on who's right and involve more people into it. Again, this is not part of deep work, but it will be, because it's like, it is a fundamental part of how negotiations work, or should work. Then you also invite a third entity that would evaluate that relationship. And it's not like that's the default case. The default case is that we assume that everything goes well, but in case someone disagrees, there's always the ability to dispute it and to actually kind of open up that case to the community, who would be rewarded for making the right decision on who is right here. And the same goes for also like the badges and payments, especially if someone is doing something that's sketchy, that can always be disputed.
And have you had to personally step in to resolve any of these disputes, or so far like just involving the community has resolved it so far?
I mean, no, it's both. I mean, I just currently I'm involved in everything at the moment, because it helps me figure out where the problems are and whose fault it is. And if it's our fault, improve it, and like compensate the client, or compensate the person who has found damage. And there's been a lot of cases where, you know, nobody really was able to figure out like why someone is unhappy, or like why something is doesn't seem right. And I had to step in and like analyze how it's done, or like who did what, and where there was an error, and that's like I'm really glad that I'm keeping track of everything and leaving everything transparent up to the case studies where you can really follow through which work has been done by whom. And it's not to point the finger at them and shame them. It's like, it's just a very useful tool for conflict resolution. And it's not going to be like super public forever. That's not the ideal, because people also want to have their privacy. But it's very important to have that data as a tool for, to reaching consensus and to finding the learning. And I try to kind of like, sometimes conflicts are negative or they seem like something that's very heating, but the resolution of those is always like, the harder the conflict, the bigger the conflict, the bigger is the learning. And that's what you want. Like, that's what you want to get from any conflict, is like, never ignore that. Like, try to figure it out to the last detail.
That is amazing. So it almost feels like right now, as you're scaling this system at Deep Work, you probably are juggling between both. You're doing client work as well as getting involved in all these processes and setting up a system to make sure that the whole thing runs smoothly.
Yeah. It's tough. I would say I'm separating my attention. So I constantly track which kind of role I have in which kind of decision, and kind of take note of that. And that then formalizes my decisions about how the system is built. So when I like started working on this collaborator expert thing, I was just like, so I'm an expert on this, but like, how would I support Charlie with product design? Like, where would I start? So now I'm the collaborator. Okay, so these roles work. And then, but then who makes sure that the project succeeds? It's like, okay, the creative director. And so, okay, so I'm also the creative director because the creative director does these things. And so slowly kind of start to disintegrating it, but I also have to be in the system and observe what's going on, because like, only when you're at the front, you also see what other people are doing and where other people kind of failing on the systems, on the boundaries that you've set. And that's also very, very important to keep track of. So I always talk as much as I can to everybody if I have the slightest feeling that something is like not fair or could create friction. It's tough because it's emotionally very tough, but it also helps building something that's extremely resilient. I hope, at least.
You've truly like decentralized the whole HR process, the hiring process, the traditional mentorship process. Like, when I went to your Discord and I saw these like badges that you were giving to people, like collaborator, and then the skills they can get, it's almost like in a traditional organization, you come in as an associate or a junior designer, then you get promoted to a designer, then a senior designer, then lead, then manager. That's like the traditional path, and you can kind of know about it. So you've kind of replicated the same model here, that someone can come as a collaborator, just shadow on a project, and they may have design skills, they may not, maybe they want to learn. But there's a path. If they keep on working on projects, get good, reviews from experts, they can actually eventually one day go to that expert level.
Yeah, and we had a couple of people who already kind of passed this, or like several people who went through the entire journey. And I think to me, the interesting, or like, I guess the exciting part is that the system really incentivizes it favors those who are really motivated and who see meaning in doing the work and enjoy doing it. And if it's not fun for you to do design work, then the system is just not going to favor you. And that means that you'll have to probably find something else, or you'll have to figure out like what to do in order to learn better. And it's also, so it might sound a little bit robotic, but it's actually very humane. So it's all humans, but they are trying to kind of get the best out of each other and progress them. And so, you can just, for projects generally, you can always shadow them. You can just always observe the process and learn from it. The documentation that we're evolving constantly also is like open to read, and I actually encourage to try it out yourself on projects, or like hobby projects. You can just like read through or even watch YouTube videos that I've recorded. It's a little bit cringy for me, but I don't watch
You've
them.
gamified the whole thing. Like you gamified the whole like career progression. So like, in a game, like if you die or something, you start a little bit backwards, like you get some penalty. So like if someone starts out and maybe in the first few projects or so, they don't do well,
Mhm.
like in a traditional organization, that means that you get put on a performance plan. If you keep doing that, you get
Right,
fired. What
right,
is the
right.
equivalent of that here?
So you can't get fired, and this is something that I also take. I kind of enjoy that as a side effect of the design, which is if you don't do well. So it's completely normal to overestimate yourself, and
Hmm.
so that was my assumption. And I think there are a lot of reasons for why that happens to people. They work in closed environments where the only feedback they get is from like managers who might not have the skill. So they either tell them you did everything great, or they tell them what is this, but they don't really understand the granularity of the design work, and it makes it very difficult to actually interpret the feedback that you're getting as the truth. Where the ideal scenario is that you do design work and then the whole world sees it, and then the whole world resonates to you. I mean, ideally the whole world, but it's just, you can't predict who's going to do that. And they reflect to you what have you done well and what have you not done well, based on experience from someone who knows what they're talking about. So that's what we wanted to do. And so that was the assumption. Like you will overestimate yourself, and there have been
Correct.
people who were just like, I can do everything, and they come in and they're like, I don't think so, and that's fine, because then your expert that you worked with just tells you, look, this is what your level is. Like this is what you did well, but let's try again, like with the next project, and you just basically get to start over. And there you already know what your level is, at least for deep work. Like you know what you're capable of.
I
So next
see.
time you go like, I'm just going to do only this thing and maybe a little bit of the next thing. And I'm just going to, okay, I know the documentation is there. I'm just going to review that and ask some people some questions if I really understand it. And then it's almost like, okay, we got your check, like we got your balance, or like, how do you say it? We figure out your baseline. That's what I was saying.
And I think that's genius because you're setting them up for success. Because when you have honestly given them that, hey, you thought you were at level 7, but honestly you're at level 4. So let's start out there. It kind of minimizes the chances of failure again, because now you can understand, like, okay, now you're level 4. Maybe now you go to level 2. So every point is just honest, critical feedback for the person to improve.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious, like, from these people or collaborators or experts, if they work on a project, let's say for a week, I'm assuming with your new design process, usually the projects last for a week, which includes like a hyper sprint. What can they expect in terms of payment? Like, what are the usual like payments or payouts you've given to them?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, it really depends on several different factors, and we actually have a calculator on our website, so you can kind of like check, because it also depends on how much time they would have, which role they would take. So let's say for a hyper sprint, we have like 3 days of workshop facilitation, 3 days of product design. The product designers also take part in workshops, and then we have about 2 days for user researchers. And so generally at the moment, facilitators for the 3 days get around, I think it should be around 3,000 US dollars, probably 2,700 euros or something. Product designers who do like all the 6 days, so they participate in the 3 workshops and do 3 days of product design based on the process. That's about 5,000 US dollars, and user researchers are about 1,700 US dollars for running user interviews and then summarizing them. But again, it depends, because there is also a mentoring bonus. So if you're an expert, you get extra pay for mentoring, but then also you don't get paid for the tasks you completely delegate. So that's a little bit complicated as well, but there is a calculator for that too. And I also should mention that we don't work longer than 4 hours a day. So the working days are actually 4 hours, but there are like things like Discord activity, or like being on a short call to introduce yourself or to meet your buddy or something.
This is mind blowing. The way you're using finance as an instrument to incentivize the right things.
Well, Yeah. There's also another thing that I should probably mention at this point, which is that we currently do have something like a kind of this profit share, which I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So in addition to the rate, or like to the, not rate, the, what do you call it? Fee, salary.
Correct.
It's not a salary, but like your payment for the project, the one-off payment. You also receive a recurring profit share in deep work. And that's like kind of a model that we've been also iterating on quite a lot, but you basically get a certain amount of money on a monthly basis once you start working. And the more you work, the higher that amount will be. And the less you work, the lower it will, or like the more it will degrade.
Wow. And right now it's all just like bunch of no-code tools, you putting some stuff in Excel sheet and Discord and bots that's trying to like implement the version 1, which is awesome. And eventually I believe you want to like slowly transition based on this feedback to where you actually have like a token, right?
Yeah, right. So one thing I have to mention about tokens, so everything is very, very close or similar to how a token would work. And we've been through like different models of that, but just like from a legal perspective, I just need to make sure that that's been said publicly. We do not have a token. Everything is currently, as you said, on no-code tools. It's on a spreadsheet. For all payments, everybody is invoicing us, and but generally the idea is to use the technology, blockchain technology, to automate all these this profit share compensation and this like recurring kind of monthly, what would you call it?
The payouts and all these things, instead of you manually doing all this stuff with no-code tools and Excel sheet.
Exactly. Yeah.
For you, the token is literally just a means, a piece of software that can automate it so you and Charlie and the team can focus on other things.
Exactly. So this is also part of the whole decentralization. And it's not that, we're not putting out a token and so we have thought about that, like just being like, hey, this is a token. It represents now like X% of like our treasury or something.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, well, first of all, it's a legal nightmare because in order to issue a token, you just need to be like a publicly traded company, and it's just.
Oh wow! I didn't even know that.
It's very complicated, and Charlie tells me to always be careful with that. But the bigger problem is also that you're once you have a token that represents some very specific value, people can buy it or can buy into it for purely financial reasons.
Yeah.
And that would influence the value in an artificial way. So rather than, so what we wanted to do is really tie in the value creation of the organization as closely as possible to some kind of, profit share that we can distribute, and avoid any type of like financially incentivized behavior where people could just like hoard in a lot of money and be like, I believe in deep work, go.
Yeah,
it's like,
let's pump up
number
that
go
coin.
up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that is very chaotic.
So could it be that right now you literally have all the functionalities that most of them that a token offers, but you're doing it on your own manually with a bunch of these measures of no-code tools and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Could it be that the more research you do, you end up not releasing a public token just because of these things and just keep it the way it is, or just write out your own custom software for it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're actually kind of working on our own software for automating a lot of these things because we are reaching the limits of what we can do with these no-code tools, and they just break, or Discord ships an update, but it's not connected to Zapier, and then Zapier updates their API, and then you have to like redo all of the connections yourself.
Yeah.
And so, it's a lot slower. It's a lot slower progress, but it automates really slowly only the things that we really need to automate, and slowly kind of reduce the workload that can be automated.
I almost think of this as like the software tool that basically runs, like people have like backend software that run the entire business. This could be that software that helps run a decentralized studio for so many people, and not studio, but just even a company. Because I've had conversations with other people on the podcast who want something like this, and they're kind of hesitant to do anything with the blockchain because they're like, they do want some control and not have to like fight with this public piece of code that's immutable, and it's what is written is written. So there's definitely challenges where, you want a little bit of the decentralization, but at the same time, you want some control where someone can come in and take a decision and just not have everything be up for vote. Because, that's just like chaos. Like if everything has to be voted on, it's like, you told me in one of the things, like, is that person who's giving the vote even the right person to be casting a vote?
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. It's not useful to throw yourself into all of these things right away. I think it's a progression, and when you consider using tools, it's like consider using any tool. Like, you shouldn't necessarily use Notion if you don't write things. You shouldn't start using Notion because you want to start writing stuff. You should first start writing and then go like, oh, I wish I could make that prettier. I wish I could organize that. What are my options? And then you look at like, what are the things that you can pick from? And the same goes for tools for decentralization. It's like, what are your problems? Like maybe you're not going to need like anything that's related to quality control. Maybe you just need like some kind of, it's called multi-sig, but like basically like a wallet that can be controlled by multiple people. Maybe you just need that. And there is a tool for that. Just use just that and like automate the things that you currently need.
I think a lot of it has to do with FOMO. Like I still use Google Keep. People are like, oh, you got to use Notion. But I'm like, I'm already used to the system. I've been using it for a while. It's simple. So for me to just switch something just because the public or the crowd is doing it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, totally agree. It's like you always kind of, I think, your approach is definitely like, or from my perspective, I really kind of resonate with that approach because it sounds like you're being mindful about what you currently need and trying to like seclude yourself from distractions. And that makes you focus on the things that you do best. Like don't need distractions.
And I think one thing I'm wondering is, as you are, making more progress on, establishing DeepWork Studio as a decentralized entity in its own way, to as much further you can take it. I'm trying to compare this to a traditional model. In a traditional model, someone starts an agency, they're the founder, they have a lot of stock, and either they get bought out by a bigger agency or a company, or they get bought out to be in-house agency for another big company. And that's where the founder, makes majority of the windfall. Or if it's just private, they have, again, a large percentage of ownership and they get majority of the profit or revenue share. And I'm not criticizing them. I think the founders who started it definitely deserve a little bit more of the upside because they're the one who started it. And everyone has different financial goals. So in this decentralized model, like if you wanted to, let's say hypothetically, you just woke up and you said to Charlie, hey, Charlie, I want to figure out a way to maybe make $20,000 a month. I'm just throwing out wild numbers. Whatever reason, like, you had your own reasons. So how can one do that at the same time? Because it's like decentralized, the community's involved, and you don't want to seem like that greedy founder that takes everything for themselves. But at the same time, you also want to like get compensated more. So how does one do that, in your opinion?
You're bringing up many different points I think are very interesting. So for me, it was always important to get as close to something like a meritocracy as possible, where you get compensated for the work that you actually do. And if I have that belief, then it should also, I'm part of it. So it has to also reflect on me. And I stand for that. So to me, there are no decisions on increasing revenue or increasing any, like looking at numbers in particular. Like obviously I look at numbers, but I don't make decisions based on purely financial interest, because my interest is essentially focusing on the most meaningful work I can think of. And I think that's something that everybody who works at DeepWork should also be part of. So I think if they are doing the best work that they want to do and they find that meaningful, then they will be compensated with that accordingly. Now, there's a lot of other factors, like globalization is very difficult, especially with kind of setting up prices, but we can keep that for another conversation. But generally, I think that should be the focus, is kind of just doing the best work you can do and like focusing on creating as much value as possible. And then there just won't be the decision of like, oh, I need to make X more amount of money. If I need some money, then I'm just going to be like, well, first of all, what I need it for. And then I'll just maybe ask a friend, can you borrow me like 20K? Because I need to do this. And if he says that's stupid, then that's my fault. And so, yeah, the meritocratic system also, I guess that was also a reason for why this whole thing existed, because it's not just important for me to compensate people with try and reach that point, because the problem is also like meritocracy is a great concept, but it's very, very difficult because currently you can't really quantify what the work is worth. Like if you work for 2 hours on some design, on some wireframes, what does that cost? Like, what's the energy that you've produced? Like where's the math? And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get closer at, is like actually trying to understand like what's the value of that work, and so that can be as granular as possible, but it's very hard. I know I kind of digressed completely. Like, do you have any other question that I haven't answered here?
I think I understood what you were trying to say by that. Like, unlike some companies or startups you've heard about, you know, like the whole VWork fiasco, I was just reading the book on it. It's not like you're using, like, you know, a founder can look at their company as their own means of enrichment. They're like, okay, how can I extract the maximum value for myself?
Right.
Yeah, that whole fiasco just unfolded. What you said made sense to me. Like, if you are building deep work completely on meritocracy, then nobody's exempt from it, including you and Charlie. So it's almost like if you said like, okay, for example, like an expert or a facilitator can make this much, like for example, $4,000 like a week for doing that project, then that applies to you. So if you wanted to make more money, for example, you would have to like also like do more projects and stuff. You have to be involved in the ground, doing the work, providing the value that merits getting paid more money.
Yeah, and there's also this point I forgot to mention. I think you're also alluding to that, which is like, what if you can like sell it, or what do you do with the like, what if the community doesn't agree with the amount of money that you're taking? And I think that's part of the system, and I think it's actually kind of a feature rather than like a bug. It's just a bit scary because, well, you don't know, and like you want to keep your base level covered, but the only thing you have is your belief in that the work that you're doing is right, and other people support that. But I also feel like that's kind of the right thing to do. Like it's double checking your reality. Like, are the other things you're doing actually correct? And so that's also like, it's nice to be able to share revenue with people because they also double check you then. And so for us, the idea is to kind of at some point go and sharing 100% of the profits across the entire community, because, you know, they're doing little tasks. They're doing like a little bit of work. They are holding up this whole infrastructure, and it's not me anymore. And so if I don't do the work, then I also it's not fair that I would get compensated for, you know, the work of other people. And
true.
So yeah.
Wow. My God, man. This is it's just like I can feel this energy coming in my body as I'm talking to you, and like, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but like as I'm sitting here and listening, and it's like your enthusiasm for building a decentralized studio is just contagious. Like, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the vibe and the passion, and my God, how can people contact you or connect with you? Maybe they want to, like, you know, join Deep Work Studio and contribute and help out from the design perspective, or maybe they want your advice on, you know, how to create their own decentralized company. How can they contact you or reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we have a Discord that should be in the show notes, and I'm constantly trying to kind of improve the onboarding flow, so it's easy to find people to talk to and ask. If you message me and I don't reply immediately, please don't be angry at me. I get a lot of messages sometimes, and I kind of postpone answering them to another time, but I try to get back to every single one. But yeah, also, like, don't hesitate reaching out. You can also send us an email at hey@deepwork.studio. That goes to Charlie and me at the moment. And our website is full with like knowledge content, but I think Discord is probably the best place to come in and just start a conversation and ask questions, whatever is interesting to you. There's a lot of people who are actually interested in helping, and also like I'm super grateful for them to be around.
And for all of you watching or listening, that's literally how this interview happened. That's how literally this thing happened. It's like I went to the Discord and I messaged Andrej like, hey, what's going on? So like he does get back to you. Probably gonna be busy, but definitely go to the Discord.
Yeah, I think those are the things.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have like a Twitter, so you can also send us a tweet, but I look at Twitter relatively rarely, so sometimes I'm like seeing there's like 10 messages hidden in this like chat thing. I'm like, oh fuck, I haven't looked at that. So yeah, Discord is more reliable.
Got it. Andrej, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Such a pleasure, Daniel. It was great. Thank you so much for the questions and the amazing conversation. I really enjoyed it.